you probably have seen my face before. I'm the horticulture agent here. This is a successful gardener program offered first Thursday of the evening of the month on Thursdays at 7 o'clock, except for July and December. And so you're privileged tonight. We've got Miss Lisa Tompkins. She's a North Carolina native. How many of you can say that? Wow. 1, 2. Oh,
We'll have a quiz.
thank you. She actually has a BA in psychology from UNC Charlotte and an AAS in Hort Tech from Central Piedmont Community College. She began working as a landscape designer in 2004 and developed an increasing emphasis on native plants and sustainable design. So that's what led her into her nursery business. It's called Elemental Landscape Design. So in addition to that, she operates a backyard native plants nursery. So those of you that are here tonight, she's got some plants that at the end of the talk that she'll have for sale back there. Lisa has also been an active member of the North Carolina Native Plant Society and the former chair of its Southern Piedmont chapter. She's completed certification in NC residential rain gardening. She's an NC plant professional and the Native Plant Studies program at the UNCC Botanical Garden. So she knows her native plants. I follow her on Facebook and she's always taking walks and finding little things that are blooming, you know. So she's really fun to listen to and learn from. Occasionally she offers open houses at her nursery. Do you still do that?
I do.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and let her take it from here. Thank you all for joining us. So,
Okay.
Forward.
Oh, I have a remote and everything.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And then that takes you back. There's no pointer.
Okay. Well, good evening and thank you. And just let me know if you have issues. If you have issues, some, I can help you with some, not all, maybe. It was only a BA in psychology. So, anyway, well, I have avoided giving this talk for a very long time because, most of the invasive plants I see are in the wild. Because I also hike and wander around in the woods and stuff. And I'm like, why would you need to replace plants with, with native plants if, they're already out there? Well, they're also still in people's gardens. So, and they're also still being planted. So, anyway, so this is a new presentation, which means I probably have another hour or so to finish it. So you're my guinea pigs, and I hope y'all are happy with that. But anyway, and I will, the things that I failed to add, I will give to them, and you can put it on your website, right? Because there are some good links, and this is fun. It's good exercise. But anyway, that's the invasive stuff. So we will talk about that. But anyway. So what are native plants? That's a good question, and it's not really easy to answer. One way to answer it is to say it's anything that was here before the Europeans arrived. Because when the Europeans arrived, they brought their own plants. Sometimes they were stuck to their clothes. Sometimes it was what they were familiar with. But what was here before is what's considered native. Oh gosh, I put one of those timing things on there. Okay. And I said I was, okay. And so there are plants that are, that occur naturally in that region. This is, as much as possible, I try to take my own photos. So this is heartleaf ginger. And if it were the other species that's common around here, Hexastylus aerifolia, the flowers, which are under the duff, which means under the leaves and stuff, you have to move it aside and see the blooms. This one's blooming now, and that is the bloom. It's pollinated by beetles, I believe. The other ones are called little piggies, and I just like to say it, but it's not blooming yet. But that is a common plant here, but not common everywhere. So we're just lucky that way. And so they're uniquely adapted to this place and the conditions that we have. Clay soil, I hear people talking about clay soil. This is clay soil. This is what grows in clay soil. So, and right now, The dimpled trout lily is blooming. I live in Mineral Springs, and there's a great population on the Mineral Springs Greenway. They're only about 4 inches tall, but they're so charming. I take more pictures of them than I even do my grandchildren. Sorry, but anyway, and by summer, they will completely disappear. So if you get a chance to go over there, you have to walk a ways before they show up. But once they do, they tumble down the hill, they go down towards the creek, and it's just it's a sight to see. But they're also adapted, the native plants, to wildlife. The coral honeysuckle, which you notice this is the native honeysuckle, not the honeysuckle that most of us know and sipped nectar from. This is the coral honeysuckle. It blooms almost exactly at the time of the hummingbird's arrival. And you can see why that might be true, because the blossom is shaped exactly like the beak of a hummingbird. Then we have exotic plants, and exotic plants are plants that come from somewhere else than North America, United States. So, I mean, almost all turf grass is from somewhere else. That's why you have to lime it, because it's not really home anymore. So it needs a little extra help. And almost all the plants that we use in landscaping, at least 2/3, probably more, come from other continents, especially Asia, because Asia and North America used to be attached, and they have maples, we have maples. They have azaleas, we have azaleas. And so that is a lot of what has been part of landscaping. So we've converted acres and acres and acres of landscape into something that the creatures that lived here don't recognize anymore. I'm not sure I recognize it either sometimes, but anyway. So herbs, almost all herbs are from the Mediterranean. Now we have herbs here, but the Native Americans did not have a written language like especially the British do. And so they wrote everything down from way, way back. I mean, they have records. They used herbs as medicine way back. But we don't have that kind of record, even though the biodiversity here in Union County, North Carolina, is higher than in all of Great Britain. And there's reasons for that. I won't go into it, but anyway. So plants that we think of as southern plants, crepe myrtles, gardenias, camellias, those are not from here. And our fruits and our agriculture. I mean, potatoes came from Peru. And apples come from Asia, peaches as well. But they're useful plants. and they're mostly well behaved. And we wouldn't have the lives we do without them. So, but they're not invasive. Some plants turn and they take a walk on the bad side. They just get away. So invasive plants are exotic plants that have escaped cultivation. And they've not only escaped cultivation, but they have displaced the plants that would naturally occur here. And here's the thing, the majority of those plants came through horticulture. Ooh, do we feel bad? Well, not intentionally, you know, it happened. Okay, this is how a Carolina woodland should look. As much as we all love our evergreens, this is how it should look, because we have these spring ephemerals, these little wildflowers that come up. They come up when the leaves are off the trees, when the sun is hitting the forest floor. They come up, they bloom, they set seed, and then some of them disappear entirely, like the trout lily, by summer when the leaves come out. Some of them will hang around depending on how conditions are, but they will come back next year. Oh, here's some spring ephemerals. Trout lily again. That is I think that is Thalictrum thalictroides, and I like to say it because that's one I can actually say. That is a violet, whose name I forget right now, a yellow. And that is an anemone, which occurs on my property, which is, and that's a trillium, which was actually a rescue, but it was from a neighboring county. So that's Kate's BI. But this is what we see all too often. And all of that evergreen, all of that evergreen that is there outcompetes these spring ephemerals. That's probably Chinese privet because it just looks like it and it spreads that way. And it's one of our most widespread invasives. But you can see why that would be a problem for these little wildflowers that are just hanging out there waiting for an opportunity. Now, our most famous invasive plant is kudzu. So it was, I'm not sure when it was introduced, but it was a while back, and I think it was for erosion control, et cetera. There used to be this great organization in Spartanburg, started by a master gardener, called KO Kudzu, and they started a like Kudzu U, and they voted in the town for the worst looking place in town with kudzu, and they went out and figured out how to remove it with no chemicals. You should get busy on that. I think that would be an excellent thing for you to do. Anyway, it was a great organization, and it was a real community. I mean, it made fun. It made it a fun event, and you could really see the difference. But Japanese honeysuckle, which is the one we do know, the one we sip nectar from. It has that kind of white, creamy flower. It has black berries. And that's not a great picture. That's from my property. But one thing that I have noticed, and I'm still waiting on someone to do a study of this, I've never seen a native honeysuckle girdle a tree, but that's exactly what Japanese honeysuckle does. And so you see the twisty, like people like to make walking sticks out of them. That's from girdling because it squeezes the life out of it, So that tree broke, as you can see, from Japanese honeysuckle. And that's just bad manners. I'm sorry. And that's what they do. But I haven't seen a study, so I want somebody to do a study. Anyway, and the point with this is Japanese honeysuckle was introduced as an ornamental back in, what did I say? Oh, gosh, I hate to see what they saw my face as, but anyway, is that 1806? It took almost 100 years for it to escape cultivation. So it was just hanging out in gardens, not causing any problems. And now it's one of the most widespread invasives that we have. I mean, you would be hard to visit any property that doesn't have some Japanese honeysuckle. And there it is, out there girdling those trees. So anyway, Bradford pear. Now I'm old enough. I remember when they were kind of new kids on the block. And it was introduced because it grew fast. It bloomed in spring. It was supposed to be a super plant, and lo and behold, it was not. So it turns out it had a weak structure, as you can see in the photo. And so to solve that problem, a new cultivar or 2 or 3 were introduced that had better branching structure. And so this sterile plant began to cross-pollinate with the improved ones, and they set fruit. And the birds eat the fruit and carry it. And you can see at the top there, that is an infestation of Bradford pear. And when it comes back, it doesn't come back as the Bradford pear. It comes back as calorie pear, which is the parent, and it has those big old thorns that can puncture a tractor tire, so I am told. There's a really bad spot in Monroe near the mall, and I'm always trying to take pictures while I'm driving. Don't tell anybody, but I haven't gotten a good one yet, so I didn't get too risky. anyway, yeah, so. And then Iliagnus. Iliagnus has been around a long time. There's more than one species. And it's evergreen, it grows fast, it sets a tasty fruit that the birds love, and so it also spreads. These are the three different species, which are the biggest problem in North Carolina. But they can also go in the shade, and they have those big whips, they big whips. It's like a monster movie. They whip up in the trees and and I mean, I've been on a removal before, and it's kind of scary, but anyway. Privets. We have two privets primarily. The Chinese privet, which is the one that's pictured here. And you can see at the top right there, that photo is from the Mineral Springs Greenway, where it got so bad you couldn't even pass through there anymore. And of course, that's evergreen, it's a thicket, and we have a marvelous volunteer, and she might even turn up here tonight, who has done amazing things with volunteers, removing invasives. They have made great progress on the invasives on the Mineral Springs Greenway. But, those are both ornamentals, and they are still being sold. They're usually improved, but well, anyway, so there's the distribution of that. And this is probably has a little age on it. I bet if we looked, it would be different today. And another new one. And if you follow plants on social media, especially if you follow invasive plants or native plants, this lesser celandine is going to show up. It may still be sold in catalogs, Yeah, and it's been banned in South Carolina. Now, if they ban it in South Carolina, that's pretty bad. Anyway, it was well behaved for a while. It was just a bulb, nothing strange, nothing unusual. And I saw an early outbreak behind Freedom Park. It was between the old Nature Museum and Freedom Park, and it was, and now it's terrible. And so it travels with water. And what is so bad about this plant is it leaves out early before the native, small native plants, the little ephemerals, have had a chance to. And it leaves out, and then it flowers, and then it disappears. So if you don't get to it, and it has tubers, see the tubers? If you don't get to it to treat it, and if you don't dig every little tiny tuber, it will wash. It follows water. So it's going down stream banks. It's going through, gullies. It's going between properties. And people think it's marsh marigold. It kind of looks like marsh marigold, which is a native plant, which barely occurs in North Carolina. You're not gonna, if it occurs at all, it would be in a little area of the mountains. So if you see a bunch of yellow, and yes, it's pretty, which makes it hard, makes it harder to tell people that they should not like it. But it will cover the forest floor. So I encourage you to look it up. It is, yeah, it's a new baddie out there. Porcelain berry. I lived in Charlotte until, I don't know, 2005. And so, I was kind of familiar with things. This one has absolutely overtaken the greenways in Charlotte. Downtown Charlotte, if you get on the Beltway to go to my little stomping ground, Central Piedmont, right? It's everywhere. It is just everywhere. And of course, it is also attractive. It looks something like a grape. So you see it and you don't go, that's terrible. That's a terrible plant. And you can see why the birds would spread it. But I had some show up at my house, just a little tiny sprig. I tried to kill it. And then last year I was in the woods and I found a big old vine, and it had been hiding out there, and it got up and it was like on top of the dogwood. So I couldn't see the foliage and I couldn't see the berries. So anyway, I killed it, and I put it in my wattling in my fence, just as a symbol of what's gonna happen. But anyway, how could it even be, well, it was a bird, I'm sure a bird brought it out there. It grows fast too. So anyway, be on the lookout for that one. And the other one is bush honeysuckle. I never saw bush honeysuckle until the last few years. And I went to the Davidson Symposium. Was that yesterday? I think it was. Anywhere you have gardeners, it's everywhere. It's everywhere in Myers Park, around Myers Park High School, the Greenway there. And it just overtakes everything. And it's blooming now. It's blooming now. It has opposite leaves and then I think it's the 2 berries. So once you recognize it, you'll see, but I mean, you'll see it everywhere. I mean, knowing invasive plants does kind of ruin hikes, but you know, what can I say? It is very satisfying to remove them. So, you know, what can we do? Sterile cultivars. Well, I talked about the sterile cultivar with the Bradford pear, the calorie pear. And it didn't work out. You know, nature will find a way many times around things. And then time, you know, it's been well behaved in the garden for decades. Oh, sorry. And we don't even know what the tipping point is. There comes some tipping point. There are other plants that I'm worried about. Crepe myrtle would be one. Japanese maples is another. I mean, because they will seed out. And when they get to a certain, I guess, a certain density, I don't know. And Lenten rose. Sorry, I'm bursting everybody's bubbles, but anyway. So what can you do instead? Oh, no, that's not even supposed to be in there. Oh, well, listen. Okay. So what do you look for in garden plants, and why do we plant these exotic plants to begin with? Well, we have a real thing about evergreen, and I kind of understand it, but anyway, the Piedmont of North Carolina just does not have that many evergreens. We don't need to have evergreens. We don't need evergreens because we have a long growing season. Where do you see evergreens? You see them in the mountains of North Carolina, and actually you see them on the coast, and I'm not sure why that is. You know? Okay. Well, anyway, so, but in our area, you've pretty much got American holly, which is slow growing. It is beautiful. I'm from Mount Holly, so I'm particularly partial to it. Nobody plants in Mount Holly anymore. They plant the, you know, Chinese cultivars. But if it's happy, it will get quite large. But it is a very beautiful plant, and it is available, but you have to look for it. Eastern red cedar. People, if you have a power line, you'll have a row of them, you know, because the birds will provide that for you. It is a great plant. It's not going to just stay still though. I mean, because the birds are going to eat the fruit, which are cones, and spread it around. And then like at this one in my backwoods, if it gets shaded out, then it's going to decline. So, you know, and there are some cultivars out there, but it is a nice screening tree. Here, my, the woodland passiflora, well, anyway, oh, what is it? Passion vine. The woodland passion vine grows there. And so it kind of festoons my, my cedar, in the fall. I didn't do it last year, but I think that's kind of cute. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a native vine. Oh, she asked me if these are native evergreens. Yes. So from here on, we're doing native plants. We've moved beyond the bad things, and we're moving forward. All right. So we don't have that many evergreens here, so we have to borrow from other regions, right? So the southern magnolia, the great screening tree. Yes.
Growing in that cedar tree.
That was it was the woodland passion vine. It's Passiflora lutea. It just naturally occurs and has little flowers about that big. And
explain to the people online that that's what was growing on the cedar.
That was what was, yeah, that's what was the garland on the cedar was the passion vine. Woodland passion vine. But southern magnolia, the species of southern magnolia gets big. It gets what, 40 feet tall, 60 feet wide? Yeah, it gets huge. But there are dwarf selections which are very nice and can be part of a mixed screen. Magnolias do not grow fast, but if you do a mixed screen with some other things, then maybe you won't notice. And it does bloom at an early age. This new one that I really like is teddy bear, partly because I like to say it, and partly because it's not a little gem, because I get tired of the same plants over and over and over again. And this one has the larger leaves, like some of the larger cultivars, that has the velvety brown underneath, and it's still about the same size as the little gem, and it blooms early, and it's not a little gem. So sorry, little gem. Anyway, the Yopon holly, which is native to the coastal plain, I don't know if it's the only, it's one of the few plants that we have that produce caffeine. There used to be a drink, what's it called? Anyway, and it's still available, but you can also make your own. And let's imagine why it's called Ilex vomitoria, or maybe not. It was used as a cleansing drink. And so anyway, but I don't think just drinking it's going to make you sick. Southern wax myrtle. It grows fast. It's another coastal plain species. It grows fast. It's relatively inexpensive, has great wildlife benefit. Sometimes they break, sometimes they get too big. You can cut them down. You can tree form them. But that's a nice evergreen native. The topal holly is a hybrid between two native hollies. And so it grows a little faster than the Ilex opaca, the American holly, but and it's more available. It grows fast. There's several selections, and it's at least native-ish, and I use it. It's not as dense as some of the new selections of, the Asian hybrids, but that means you can see the berries. So I like it. Let's see, and the arborvitae, which is really more of a northern plant. It does come in to North Carolina, but it's really kind of an Appalachian plant. But there's some good cultivars out there. If you're going to make a mixed screen, they perform well. They look good. What more do you want? Really? So anyway, and you can use deciduous plants as screens, but I know we've got this evergreen thing. Speaking of which, for foundation plants, just as they're not evergreen screening plants that are native, there are also not many evergreen little bushes, little dwarfs that go in front of the 2.5 foot, the windows that are 2.5 feet off the ground. But some of these larger plants have been cultivated to be more dwarf. The inkberry holly, this one is Gem Box. It's a new one. It's a nice little plant. I mean, I think they do best in full sun, but it does well. And I think hollies are a host plant for a butterfly, and pollinators like them. So even if you don't get berries, because most of them are male, is that right? Or most of them are female. Anyway, most of them are one sex, and you got to have the other sex to get the berries. But, and that can be done, but there's still benefit even if you don't get the berries. I stumbled across this garden in the upper right in Charlotte, near where my kids went to school at Independence Park, near the hospitals. And it's a wedding venue, right? And it's part of Parks and Rec. And I just naturally assume that things are going to be exotic or invasive. So I was kind of giving it the stink eye. And then I went over there and I'm like, well, that's Yopon holly. You can manage it. Now, that means you have to manage it. But I mean, you can also grow it for form. Some of the dwarfs get bigger than you think they're going to, but you can prune. People are afraid of pruning. Now, I would never myself do that for me, but it does make a good frame. And one thing, if you want native plants or plants that are kind of looser, one way to make them not scary is to put a frame around them. And that way it says, it's all under control. Those plants are not going to come and get you. Everything's in order. All is well with the world. Now this dwarf viburnum on the bottom left, I think I read about it first, 6 or 7 years ago, and I chased that plant all over the state. And now it'll show up every once in a while and then it'll disappear. But that is an evergreen viburnum. It's from a coastal species, this, kind of big and lanky. But this is a nice, tight version. It is evergreen, it flowers, and I've seen it in landscapes, and it has performed over time to do well. So now, I'm back on the chase because they were being grown locally, then they disappeared, and that, it keeps me out of trouble mostly. The arborvitaes, there are dwarf arborvitaes. Some are more dwarf than others. And this little Mr. Bowling Ball, I like him, and I also like to say it, but that's a neat little form. Like on either side of your steps in full sun, even if you're going to put deciduous stuff on either side, it still tells you, this is the front door. Welcome to my home. You can come in, right? And it stays a nice size. Here's some evergreens for shade. The dog hobbles, we have at least 2 species. The one on the left, this is a variegated form, and it has been in the trade for a long time. And some people don't like the variegation. I mean, it's one that you have to use it sparingly, but it does show up nicely in the shade. But the actual species is green, and it is the leucothoe, which is leucothoe, that grows in this area naturally. So if you go down to Lansford Canal, you'll see leucothoe. That's that leucothoe. If you go to Gaston County to the near Red Lair, you'll see it, and that's that leucothoe. You can get the green. This one's the one that you see the most, but it does perform well, and it seems to be deer resistant to me. And it's a good plant for like a morning sun environment. The one on the bottom right is a coastal leucothoe. So it's the one you would see if you go east. And this is another form. I'm talking about cultivars. I'm not a purist, especially when I do design. I do other stuff too. I do wild species too. But this is a nice form. It's got dark green leaves. It doesn't get some of the problems like mildew and whatever that some of the others do. And it's a nice little evergreen shrub for a part shade, morning sun exposure. On the top right is Elysium. Now that is yellow. It is, but if you use it sparingly, it shows up well in the shade, and that is one that really needs shade. It's very slow growing. It really comes from south of us. That selection is called Florida Sunshine. There are some others, but it does brighten up a shady area, and it tends to be deer resistant, as far as I know, until deer don't read books. That is a shame. It's a crying shame, but it is true. Fragrance, because a lot of the viburnums that you see in the ornamental, in horticulture, they have the viburnums are fragrant because people like fragrance. But I don't think any of the native viburnums are very fragrant. Now, they may be somewhat fragrant, but there are fragrant plants. Summer sweet, Clethra alnifolia, another coastal plant. It does sucker some. Some of the cultivars do that less. That doesn't bother me. If you know something is suckering, plant it with that in mind. And think of it as free plants, or dig up the suckers and pot them up and give them to your friends, or bring them to the master gardener sale. You know, there's good things you can do. Sweet bay magnolia, that's a more tree form magnolia. It has small, creamy white flowers that are very fragrant. Even the males in my household can smell it when it blooms. It has smaller, soft leaves, so it doesn't have the big crunchy leaves that the southern magnolia has. And when the wind blows, that kind of white underside kind of glitters in the sun. It makes you think you're cool, even if you're burning up, you feel cool. You might need to go get a mint julep or something like that. Sweet shrub, Calycanthus floridus. That is a naturally occurring shrub. It occurs here in Union County. It is fragrant. It may not be reliably fragrant. So if you want fragrance, you might want to get a selection that's fragrant. Now, there are some cultivars out there. If you want the native one, there's some crosses with the Asian one. I do not buy those for native gardens. That is the native one. People that know only a few native plants, this is one of them they know. People have a memory of this plant back in the days before deodorant, and women could tuck a little, sprig of it in their décolletage and smell a little better. So anyway, but it's a cool plant too. It's got those maroon flowers that bloom in the spring, fairly early. Virginia sweet spire. Is that fragrant? I don't know. You think it is? Okay. I can't smell everything that other people can smell. I don't smell Bradford pears, and even my son said, "Oh gosh, they stink." And I'm like, I can't smell them. Anyway, that's probably a good thing. Virginia sweet spire also gets beautiful fall color. So it is pretty available in the trade. You can find it at most garden centers. There's some dwarf forms. There's some new forms. Same with the clethra. There are perennials that are fragrant. The eastern blue phlox, Phlox divaricata. I brought a couple of different selections of those, but those are fragrant. It is more of a mountain phlox than another one that I also like, but I didn't include it in this, that actually grows in Union County, Phlox stolonifera. But there are two woodland phlox, at least. In fact, Carolina phlox grows occasionally on my property, but anyway. Native azaleas. All native azaleas are deciduous. They lose their leaves. They may be more tree-like. And some of them are fragrant. Not all of them are. But this is one selection that is, it's not selection, it's a species that is fragrant. The Southeast has more native azaleas than any other place in the country. Also more trillium. I'm sure Debbie will be glad to explain to you why that is. just so she has something to do. Garden phlox, the tall garden phlox blooms in late summer. It's also more of a mountain plant, but it does well here. I usually give mine a little bit of shade or afternoon shade anyway. And it's just a delight. And the hummingbirds like it, the butterflies like it, it's fragrant. So, it's a great plant. Colorful berries. That's another reason that people plant plants that get away. And of course, when they have berries that the birds eat, that's when things become a problem. But American beautyberry, now most beautyberries that are sold in the trade are not the native one. It's not that hard to tell the difference, but they have larger leaves and the berries encircle the stem much more tightly. And anyway, it's a great plant. And for me, it tends to be quite deer resistant. Red chokeberry. I might have to get some water, but anyway, let me take a sip of water. And hope I don't make a bunch of noise while I do it. Cause I like ice. The red chokeberry, it blooms early in the spring. It has pink anthers, you know, the stamens and anyway, it's one of the first plants to bloom, and then it gets berry set. And if you could imagine chokeberry, that means that's not the first the first berry that birds are going to choose. They're going to wait until they return from their southern migrations, and then they're going to eat it. So the benefit for us is we have berries through the winter. And in addition to that, it also gets an excellent fall color in the leaves. So it's just a beautiful red. It's a great plant. It's been in horticulture for quite a while. And that's a good one. American elderberry. Now, it can get a little rambunctious for people. It is a super fruit, but I just cut mine down. I had one kind of, you know, it was kind of hanging out. It wasn't dead. It was, you know, wasn't happy. I moved it and it grew 15 feet. So this year I took it all the way down. But the flowers are bigger than your head. And then you get these berries with those red stems. And of course, the birds love them. Or you can make a tonic for the winter. So one of my favorite plants for landscaping, I repeated that. Oh, well. Okay, is the possum haw viburnum. I also like to say possum haw. So, but the leaves are shiny. The leaves look good all through the season. They also get a good fall color. But the berries, they begin kind of a greeny white, then they turn pink, and then they get dark. And so it's just a great looking shrub. And it has a long ornamental period. Flowering dogwood, we forget. Now, I'm not sure if that's technically a berry, but we're just going to say it is for now. And it probably is. Or is it a poem? You know, well, see, I'm putting her on the spot. Okay. Now birds, this is very nutritious and very delicious. So the birds eat this before their migrations. They clean them out. And it's also, even if they're not feeling so good, these dogwoods, they have a reliable berry. So when you think about flowering dogwood, our state flower, also think about the berry. Hearts of busted. I also like to say that. I like to say all the Southern words, but that's a euonymus. Euonymus americanus. It looks like not much of anything for most of the year. It has a little green flower that's not going to set the world on fire.
Sorry, the battery.
That's all right. Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
just gonna,
That's okay. We don't want you to. Okay,
you're good.
you saved the day.
Okay.
And then the fruit in the fall, you know, it's kind of round, and then it bursts open, which is why it's called Hearts of Bustin', and it's just magnificent. Now, deer love this plant, so you have to place it somewhere or put it in an obelisk or a cage or in a corner near the house, something where the deer aren't going to see it. Even in the wild, I hardly ever see them with fruit unless they're kind of tucked into a holly or something. But it's a great plant for fall color, and the stems stay evergreen all year, so they photosynthesize throughout the winter. Georgia holly, which you may not know, and I'm going to include that with other deciduous hollies, which are hollies that drop their leaves. You know, there's Ilex verticillata, there's decidua, which is also a possum haw holly. I also like to say that. But the Georgia holly, Union County has I'm going to say that wrong. We might have the northernmost population of it. Anyway, there's something that's special about our population. And as you can see, the berries are on a stem, so it looks like a cherry. But it's a beautiful holly. Now, you're probably not going to find it anywhere unless you have a wooded area, and then you may just find it. I have been looking for years, and I had it, even though I was looking at, I don't know, found one on the side of the road and I was like, oh, I wish I could have that holly. And then I looked up and, oh, it's been here all along. But anyway, but any of the deciduous hollies, and I think the hollies are pretty deer resistant. And they give you that nice winter color. Also, these berries tend not to be all that tasty either. So they may eat them before they eat the chokeberry, but they don't eat them as early as they eat the dogwood. Spice bush. It has tiny yellow flowers like now. And then it develops this beautiful red shiny fruit that you can use as a spice. I think it's dried and used as a spice. It is also the host plant for the spice bush swallowtail butterfly. You have to have male and female. Of course, that would be the female with the berries. But it's a nice plant. It's got, especially for wildlife gardening, it's got all the things. So, and they're easier to find than they used to be. And if you want to see a colony of spice bush, again, go past the trout lilies on the Mineral Springs Greenway, and you will find a nice big colony of spice bush. It's amazing. Pokeweed, I had to put pokeweed in there. You know, that is a beautiful plant. Now, it's a rambunctious plant, and it is a messy plant if you run into those berries when you're mowing the lawn, like I've been known to do. I look like I've been in a fight, but it produces berries that are loved by birds. So I always let a few stay in my kind of mixed border. And they have beautiful flowers too. I took a botanical drawing class, and this was in, you know, our assignment. You know, she put them down. You're supposed to look very carefully. I'm like, I didn't realize you were such a beautiful plant. I've known you all my life and I didn't know. Even perennials. This is Solomon's plume, also sometimes called false Solomon seal. And look at the berries on there. That's fantastic. And this is me wandering around in the woods, whatever. And I think I was collecting the Solomon's plume berries. And then I saw Virginia creeper, which people, is it poison ivy? No, it's not poison ivy. And it grows up the trees. It grows everywhere. It'll grow in your house if you let it. I wouldn't, but it's a great wildlife plant, and it's a very ornamental plant, and it has berries. Of course, so does poison ivy. And, you know, it's out there too, but just learn to identify it. But all those have berries. Flowering shrubs, the oak leaf hydrangeas are great. If they come into North Carolina, they barely come into North Carolina, but they do well here. And there are dwarf cultivars, there are double cultivars, you know, whatever. And they have a long ornamental period. So for me, in my foundation plants, I will use some evergreen, but I love having these hydrangeas near my foundation. I mean, they're pretty. They get good red fall color. Those flowers will fade to kind of a pink and then kind of brown. You know, you can cut them for dried flower arrangements. But it, you know, it just looks good for a long time. Nine bark, that I took that picture in Oxford, England, where they had more of our native plants in their gardens than we had in ours. I don't know if that's still true, but it was true then. Anyway, that, and of course the dark leaves are not supposed to be as beneficial for the caterpillars, but that's what's more available. You can get the straight species, but it takes some work. Black Hall viburnum, that is probably the most widespread viburnum in our area. It grows almost like a small tree, and you will see it shortly. And it's kind of creamy white flowers. I see it in Charlotte. I mean, that's one, you know, I'm driving through town, and you can see it in the little scraps of woodland that's left. So, but this occurs on my property. You know, if you do drive-by botanizing like I do, and I'll drive past something and go, what was that? You know, anyway, but that's a great little shrub, and it also has berries, and, you know, but you can train it almost as a small tree. Flowering shrubs, buttonbush. I mean, you can see that in ditches around here. I mean, but it's a great garden plant. This one's in my rain garden. It's bigger than I wanted to get. I'm gonna cut him down too, and let it re-flush. But it's a fun plant and pollinators love it. And even the seed heads, it kind of looks like a Dr. Seuss plant in the winter. Anyway, St. John's worts. I get offended by things that I don't have anyone to complain about, so I'll complain to you about it. St. John, like the ones you buy, St. John's wort, almost all of them are from Europe or Asia. When Union County has more species of St. John's wort than I can guarantee you all of England. We just don't know it. And this is a cultivated form. You can see the pollinators on there. And it's so much fun. I can't even take a still picture because they're kind of boom, 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 boom. They won't stay still, but it's really fun. It also has a long ornamental period. It has the nice blooms, but then it has a great fall color and it takes a while to lose its leaves. There are other St. John's worts that you can use. And if you have any woods or even grass, I have another one that grows in my lawn. It grows in my woods. I have another one that grows down by the creek. So, it's good to get out there and look at what we have. There's summer sweet again. That's a great little shrub. And there are some dwarf ones. There's some new selections. Again, there's the Virginia sweet spire. And I still do some design work and I do what I think is going to look good, but you never know. So I did front foundation. I did some little Henrietia, Virginia sweet spire. And in front of that, I put that Viburnum obovatum because that's evergreen, right? Kind of a frame. And I went back and I thought, gosh, I'm good. I didn't know it was going to look so good, but it still does. So that's a good combination. Then you get your evergreen and you get your color because you get more color from deciduous shrubs. That one has great red fall color. All right. Okay, that bottle brush buckeye is almost in downtown Monroe. I was driving. It was when they were doing some roads and I had to go on a detour and I was like, stop the car. That's a bottle brush buckeye and it's over the eave of the house. I couldn't believe it. And I tried to talk to the owner and she wasn't there. And then I talked to her neighbor and I said, do you think she'd mind if I come back to take some pictures? I mean, that's really all I wanted to do was take. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have minded getting some seed, but I was really looking for the pictures because they hadn't bloomed yet. But what a magnificent thing that is. And it gets yellow fall color and it's just fantastic. But it took a long time it is a slow growing plant. I bet that thing is 30 years old. What do you think? I mean, they are not fast. They're not fast growing, but they're beautiful. And more shade. It blooms in the middle of the summer. It has an inflorescence about that long. And there are not a lot of things that bloom in the summer. So that's nice. Florida anise. This one's Haley's Comet. It is evergreen, and I could have included that with screens, but it's not so big. But it's a cool plant. Like many plants, it is toxic, but don't eat it and don't let your pets eat it. But it's a great little plant, and it's evergreen, deer resistant, and it has those cool flowers that kind of remind me of sweet shrub. Pasture rose. Unless you get out of the car and wander around the side of the roads like I do, you will not realize that these are growing around us quite a bit. But this is, in my neighborhood is kind of the Piedmont Prairie remnant where the federally endangered Schweinitz sunflower is. So that it's, it can't be developed and stuff. And also at the Greenway, at the head of the Greenway, they're up on the bank and they're more places than you would think. And they're tiny. They're tiny little roses. It's a single rose. It doesn't last long, but then they get great rose hips. There's a very similar looking rose, bless you, that is the swamp, they call it the swamp rose, and it's slightly different. And I've seen them growing side by side on the side of the road. And it's just there. So that's a native rose. flowering trees, and I think I'm almost at the end of my, oh, well, no, I might have one more. Flowering trees, and I mean, I could have gone on, I did not, but serviceberry, this is the cultivar, which is probably the most available. It has white flowers early, they're blooming now. I have a serviceberry that's up in the canopy so high that I have to get like binoculars to see it, and I can never get fruit. And anyway, but they occur here. I saw one. I do the drive. I have a map of plants in my head. Right across from the hospital, where Franklin comes into 74, there is an amelanchier in there blooming right now. And I did not stop. I thought about it, but anyway, I had places to go. Eastern redbud. It's a great plant. Now, you know, sometimes the horticulture trade gets a hold of a plant and they kind of mess it up. So, and I think that has happened with Eastern redbud. I have heard there's some issues, you know, because they do all the cultivation and they do the variegation and they do the, you know, all the stuff. Anyway, but I mean, they naturally occur here. Those are edible blossoms and they're high in vitamin C and they look really pretty on a salad. So if you have red buds, enjoy them. If you have red buds, you're going to have more red buds because they seed out very well. It's one of the first things to bloom. Amelanchiers first, and then you have your dogwoods and your red buds. Red buckeye, its native range is a little south of us, but not by much. It blooms very early. And who does it bloom for? Hummingbirds. Again, tubular flower, red. It's a small tree to large shrub. By the middle of the summer, it doesn't feel so good because it leafed out early. It did its thing. So you don't want to put it like as a centerpiece for a summer landscape, but it takes some shade. It can take some sun too, but it's a beautiful plant. Now, oh no, I had two more. Okay, anyway, ferns. There is a fern that has been selling like hotcakes for a while, for over 10 years, maybe 20 years. And it has begun to escape into the wild. That is autumn fern. Does great in the garden, looks good, evergreen, stands up, spreads. And it spreads by spores, which are just float in the air. So here's some native ferns. Dixie wood fern is a natural hybrid between two native ferns. I think Dr. Larry Mellichamp, who we miss, I think he introduced this to the trade some years ago, and it's a nice, robust fern. It has hybrid vigor, meaning it is more vigorous than either of its parents. And if you go to UNCC Gardens, you can see some big ones, 3 or 4 feet tall. I have mine in my dry woods. Most of my plants are pretty neglected anyway. It's hanging in there. It's not setting the world on fire, but it's not any worse than it was to start with. And you know, it's a good fern. Christmas fern is probably our most common fern. And if you walk in almost any woodland, you're going to see Christmas fern. It's evergreen and it's tough. I mean, it can take drought, dry shade. If you see, again, if you come to the Greenway and you see the big colony of ferns, Dr. Mellichamp was also a fern expert, and he said they grow, I don't know, a ½ inch to an inch a year. So where you see these big colonies, that's an ancient population of Christmas fern. Lady fern, they're pretty available. They are deciduous. They die back in the winter. And if it gets too hot and too dry, they'll kind of, you know, they may disappear. But if we have a rain, they're coming back. So it is a long-lived fern. And you know, and it's a great fern too. And that may be, let's see, is it? No, I've got one more. And I didn't add some vines that I would have added, but vines. Crossvine, it is related to trumpet creeper, which is a very vigorous vine, which you do not want on your house. But trumpet creeper is the #1 nectar source for hummingbirds, and it blooms in the summer. If you've got a telephone pole, if you've got a, if you've got a fence, if you've got a face of a tree that you can let it grow on, let it grow. But crossvine, it is a vigorous vine. It mostly grows in bottomlands. It clings to trees, like it grows straight up the face of a tree. And it's mostly evergreen. Sometimes it'll die back, but it has those big tubular flowers, which are also visited by hummingbirds. And it's just a nice looking plant. And it's not as available as it should be. Trumpet honeysuckle or coral honeysuckle, it's a great plant. There are selections that have a longer blooming period. Oh, and I didn't put in the slide that I have this growing in a pot on my deck, so I can see the hummingbirds come and visit, right? And there was a caterpillar on it, and I'm like, what is this caterpillar doing? It was a big caterpillar too, and it turned out the clear wing moth, the moth that looks like a hummingbird. That's one of its host plants. So anyway, also trumpet honeysuckle has attractive berries too. They're like clear red kind of berries after it blooms. Carolina jessamine, state flower, South Carolina. Evergreen, twining, which is one thing that makes it so useful. It's not going to eat the house. It's not going to grab the house. Because, those with the aerial roots, I mean, when they get caught on, they're not letting go easily. So anyway, as a screen in the sun, if you do not have a lot of width, a freestanding trellis with Carolina jessamine on it creates a beautiful screen that's not wide. It's as big as you make your structure. You can do it with 4x4s and 2x2s and 1x2s and little finials, and you got it. You can even put the honeysuckle with it. You could put the crossvine with it. They don't care. They will kind of duke it out and bloom at different times. And it's a good way to provide screening with color or on a patio, So I think that will be the last slide. I had more I wanted to do. I ran out of time. Is that, yeah. Oh yeah, that's not supposed to be there. Do you, yeah, okay. Will I see them? Will they come up for me? So if anyone has any questions out there in the netherworld, you can put them in the chat box. Oh, what I see, that's not, oh, well, anyway, those are some books that are good. There are lots of good books.
Sounds like we need to get Lisa to lead a tour of the Greenway.
It's excellent. I'm telling you, it is super fun. I mean, there's something, native azaleas there. There's the trout lilies. There's it's a lot of good stuff there.
I'm kind of picking on you.
Well,
there,
no, but I'm
it's
serious.
like,
No, it
well,
really,
it'd be great to follow you around.
no, I would happily, see, I live closest
You
to
live
the
right
creek,
there.
so I can walk across the creek to get there. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Oh.
What's that, the book? They are, and I will add information from the presentation that they can post. But the North Carolina Native Plant Society has a group of resources and books. They also have handouts. They have one for gardening in the Piedmont that you can print out. There are lots of good resources there. And of course, new books come out all the time, and there's never one book that will do it all. So they'll have the newest ones there, and it's just a good place for information. So, yeah. Oh, brother. Dead nettle. Dead nettle? Is it the one with the purple? Oh, yeah, no, that's the one with the purple. That's an introduced weed.
Okay, so repeat the
plant.
Okay, so is dead nettle, and that's the, oh yeah, that's the lamium
That's
one.
like-
There are two that look very much alike, but yes, it was introduced, probably from some people's European ancestors that, I don't know what they were thinking, but they brought it along. And, or it might have come in seed, other seed. Anyway, it is a weed. You can pull it. There are some benefits. I think, do people eat it? I don't know. Anyway, okay, it's in the mint family. But yeah, it's, when you have a lot of a thing, that's kind of a clue to me. If it's in my bed and then I look and it's in my lawn too, that tells me, I think that's a, I think that's a weed, or, because usually, plants that aren't weeds and aren't introduced because, they didn't bring their controls with them. They don't grow everywhere. So anyway, yeah. Well, it will grow here. And of course, that would be one of the controversial plants in the, in the butterfly world. There are many native, milkweeds, which are good. So I'm not gonna get into that part. But for nectar plants, for, monarchs, you really want asters and goldenrods and those late blooming, species, because they come back through on their way south in the fall, and that's what they really need. And we're short on milkweed, and we're also short on nectaring plants. So, there are wild asters that just appear. I let them appear, the white, there's like 4 of them. And every year I have to remind myself how to tell the difference between them. But they fit in with my other flowers, and, any asters are one of the most beneficial, plants for pollinators, including monarch butterflies.
Any other questions? No more online? Nope. You good? Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.